Begin the Gemara today, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom of the page where it says Leime Ketanoi. What's the Gemara speaking about here? This is the middle of a sugya where the Gemara is discussing a situation where a person has a piece of basar on the table, and then he has a piece of basar shlomim on the table, which now it's mutter to eat because it's after the zrika of the dam of the carbon was done for this. And he says Zeh Kezeh. He's making a neder that this piece of basar should be like this piece of basar. So the question is, what does that lashon mean? Does that lashon mean that like this piece of basar that was once a shlomim, he's going back to what its original status was, or no? Where he's saying zeh kazeh like what it is now, and now it's mutter. So therefore he's saying that this piece of basar should be like this piece of basar, which is mutter. So there's no neder that takes effect. The Gemara has this suffix. It tried to bring a few rayas to this. It did not resolve it. Now the Gemara says leime ketanoi. Let's say that this question is a machlokes tanoim. It says in the Braise, Harei alai kebechor. Person says, I take upon myself that this should be aser like a bechor. A bechor, of course, is a carbon. It's aser. So it has the kedusha of a bechor. So does the neder take effect? Rabbi Yaakov oiser. Rabbi Yaakov says yes, it's aser. The neder takes effect. But Rabbi Yehuda mater. Rabbi Yehuda says the neder does not take effect. So the Gemara explains what is this machlokes about. This bechor is definitely a carbon which is aser. So when he says that a piece of meat or whatever it is should be like this bechor, why should it not take effect? Why should it take effect? What's this machlokes about? Hey chidami, what are we speaking about? So now the Gemara says, are we speaking about the bechor before the blood was sprayed in the mizbeach? So the bechor is still aser for anybody to eat. So what the Gemara means to say is, the person clearly said so. He said, this piece of meat should be like this bechor before zrikas dam. That's what he actually said. If that's the words he said, so then my time in the man shari. What's the reason of the opinion that says that the neder does not take effect before the zrikas damim? This bechor is something which is aser. If he said, let this piece of meat be like this bechor, and he clearly spelled out like the bechor after the blood was sprayed on the mizbeach. So now at this point the bechor is mutter. My time at demanda asar, if he clearly spelled that out in his words, so why would one opinion say that it should be asar? The Ran adds to this Gemara here that what's if the person says actually what it says in the lashon of the Braise itself? The Braise says not that he spelled out before zrikas damim, not he said after zrikas damim. He just said simply, let this piece over here be like a bechor. So then that also should not be any machlokes. In such a case, also it for sure should be asar. Because a bechor is a behemoth, which is a carbon. If he doesn't spell out any specific details before zrika, after zrika, a bechor is a carbon. It's like the classical neder. Every neder a person says, let this piece of basar be like a behemoth, which is a carbon, a oila, a shlomim, a bechor. So for sure there's no reason to be a machlokes about that. The Gemara doesn't even spell it out, but that's pashut. So elalav, how are we going to explain this machlokes between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda? Don't you think the pshat here is as follows? The machis basa b'chayr, that he has a piece of basa b'chayr sitting on the table. Umachis basa deha'ech, and then he has another piece of basar, a regular piece of basar sitting gabei on the table. And va'amar, and what he said is zeh kazeh. This piece of meat that I have here should be like this piece of b'chayr that the zrike was already done on it. And v'tanoihi. And we're going to say that this is the shaila that we're dealing with the whole time. And right here, this is the machlokes tanoim. When you have a piece of basar after the zrika, and he says something should be like zeh kazeh, this should be like this. How do I interpret that language? What does that mean? Does he mean the way it is presently, and it's mutter? Or does he mean the way its original status was, that it was a bechor, and therefore it's asar? That would be the pshat of the machlokes over here.
Did he say la'achar?
Again, what? No. He did not. Again, if he would spell it out, then it's clear that he meant la'achar, that it's mutter. But he just said a stam loshen, zeh kazeh. So what does that mean? Does he mean the way its status is today, or the way it was originally?
What does that mean?
Does that mean the one that's mutter? Kazeh, like the other one, like kazeh. But what's the kazeh though? Kazeh the way it is today, or the way it is originally? That was the whole shayla the Gemara is speaking about.
Because that means that what now that it's like a bechor
that the zrika was already done,
and you're allowed to eat it.
Well, maybe we don't know. That's the shayla here.
What it means.
Yeah, then you would be allowed. Correct.
What's he trying to affect?
Why is he saying it? He's just trying to say that it should be mutter.
If it's mutter before also, it's a piece of
and it's true. Anachanami. So then what he's saying is meaningless. True. Anachanami. So the Gemara answers, Loi, that's not the pshat of the machlokes here. The Kula Alma, everybody agrees, Lefnei Zrikas Damim, that we're talking over here about a Bechor, and he said clearly that it should be like a Bechor before the Zrikas Damim. Now, if he said it should be like the Bechor before the Zrikas Damim, at that point the Bechor is Aser. So why should the Neder not take effect? My time in the Mam Shari, what's the reason for the one that says that it's mutter? This goes back to a rule that we had already a few times, because Makra, the Pasuk says, Ki Yider, the continuation of the Pasuk actually, some Agora said, I think over here in the Gemara. The continuation of the Pasuk is, Ki Yider Neder Lashem. Why does it say this double Lashon, Ki Yider Neder Lashem? What it's saying is, Achiyadur B'davar Hanadar. Whenever you want to make something Aser, and he's saying that it should be like something else which is Aser, that something else has to be something that became Aser through a Neder, not something that's Aser on its own. This is going to be the first Mishnah in the next Perek that we're going to learn tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. This is a very basic rule you have to always remember in Masechet Nedarim. If you want to transfer an Isser from something else onto a certain object, it has to be something else which is a Dava Hanadar. So what's a Bechor? A Bechor is something that becomes Kadosh from birth, from when it comes into the world. You don't lafuke Bechor de Dava Asahu. A Bechor is Asa from birth. So therefore it's not a Dava Hanadar, so the Neder doesn't take effect. So now the Gemara explains, Oman the Asar, the one that says that it will be Aser. Amakra, the Pasuk says, La Hashem. After it says, Ki Yidin Neder, it adds the words La Hashem, L'Rabbis Davara Aser. So we are going to be marbed that even if you're going to say that this object should be like a Dava Aser, but not every Dava Aser. Not every Dava Aser. Only a Bechor, which the Gemara will soon explain why a Bechor is different. If you're going to say that something should be like a Bechor, specifically Bechor, then I say that the Neder will take effect. Man the Shari. Now the opinion that says that if you say that this object should be like a Bechor and it's mutter, so Lashem Ayavidle, what does he do with this extra word of Lashem? What he said, what he learns from that word Lashem is Lematvis Bechatas Vasham. When a person says that this object should be like a Chatas and a Asham. What's a Chatas and a Asham? Chatas and a Asham is actually a carbon that a person is obligated to bring because of an Aveda that he did. So on one hand, it's an obligation he has, it's not a choice. But at the same time, though, how are you makdish that behemoth? You can choose any behemoth to be makdish for the chatas and the yasham. So therefore, it's not considered to be something which is asr on its own. It's something that you chose to make it asr with a neder. So the Gemara explains this here. Omar isa lerabbis chatas va'asham ulahoitzi esabachar. Why, according to this opinion, the word lashem is telling you that if you say something should be like a chatas and asham, it becomes aser. But if you say that something should be like a bechor, so that is excluded. A bechor, you say, is aser on its own. It's not considered to be a dova anoder, and the neder does not take effect. So the reason is mar bani chatas v'asham shuhu matvis beneder. Because by a chatas and asham, the person chooses which be'eme he wants to be makdish for the carbon. So therefore, it's considered to be a dova hanoder.
Would it not be a double or another? I'm sorry.
Because he has an obligation. He has an obligation to bring the carbon versus a person that donates a carbon. Person that donates. However, we're going to exclude a bechor shu kaddish mimei imay. A bechor is a kaddish already from when it comes out from its mother's womb. So it's kaddish on its own. So therefore, that's something which is asur from the beginning, and therefore you can't be matfis a neder in a bechor. Now the Gemara explains the other opinion. One that says that if you say that something should be like a bechor, and he learns out from Lashem to say that it becomes aser, bechor nami matfisoi benederhu. Because even by a bechor there is a neder. What's the neder by a bechor? The Tanya, it says in the Braise, Mishum Rebbe Yamru, it was said in the name of Rebbe, Minayin lenoilad bechor betoich beisai. How do I know if a person's behemoth gives birth to a bechor? Even though it's kaddish on its own, but nevertheless there's a mitzvah for you to verbally say this bechor should be holy. Shanama, because the pasuk says hazachar taktish, that if your behemoth gives birth to a zachar, a bechor, taktish. Taktish means you should be makdish it. So therefore, you see that there is a neder involved in the kedusha of this bechor. Says the Gemara, man the shari. The one that says that a bechor is not considered to be something that has involvement of your neder because it's holy on its own. Because he says, if you're not going to be makdish it, if you're not going to do this mitzvah that the pasuk says takdish for a bechor, milay mikdish, will it not be kaddish on its own? It will be. It's just a mitzvah that you should be makdish it. So since even without you being makdish it will be kaddish on its own, a b'chayr is considered to be something which was asr on its own. So this is what the machlokes comes down to. That because a b'chayr has two aspects to it. On one hand, it's kaddish on its own. And on the other hand, there's a mitzvah to be makdish it. Does it qualify to be considered a davar hanader because there's a mitzvah to be noider to say that it's kaddish? Or do I say that even if you don't, so it's going to be asr on its own, so it's considered to be a davar that was asr from birth, and therefore you can't bring a neder from that onto another object. Said in the Mishnah, Ke'imra, Ke'dirim. Going back to the previous Mishnah, person says that something should be like an imra. So imra literally means a lamb, but he says Ke'imra, so he means like a specific lamb, and that's the lamb that's brought for a carbon. Or Ke'dirim, like a barn, that where they keep the animals in the Beis HaMikdash for a carbon. So then it's going to be Yasser. But the diak here is that Tana and the Mishnah holds it's only if you say Ke'imra or Ke'dirim, so that indicates that you mean something specific, and therefore we say it refers to a carbon. But if you just said, let this object be a imra, dirim without the ke, so then it will not take effect. So here the Gemara is going to bring in a braisa, a Tana that argues on this. So Tana and a braisa we learned, imra, le imra, ke imra. So whether he says it without a chafadimyan, he says just imra or le imra, or he says ke imra, or the same regarding the term of dirim, which means a barn. Dirim, le dirim, ke dirim, and the same regarding the wood. Eitzim, le eitzim, ke eitzim, which was also brought in the Mishnah. The eitzim, if you say ke eitzim, so the Mishnah said, so then it means the eitzim on the mizbeach. But the B'rai Seir says doesn't make a difference whether you say eitzim, le eitzim, or che eitzim, ishim, le ishim, ke ishim, like the fire, or like the fire, mizbeach, le mizbeach, ke mizbeach, or heichal, le heichal, and ke heichal, the heichal of the Beis HaMikdash, Yerushalayim, le Yerushalayim, ke Yerushalayim. So whether it's with a chaf, without a chaf, or whether with a lamed or without kulan, in all of these cases, when he says that this object should be, let's say he says this object should be imra she oichalach, what I would eat from you. So what is he saying? So then aser. So then this is going to be aser. So again, like I said, the chiddush of this Tana is you don't have to have that chaf in the beginning to make it unique. Even if you without the chaf adimyan, I say that it's aser. But if he concluded his statement by saying lo yoichalach, that what I'm not eating from you should be like an imra, should be like a carbon, so then the neder doesn't take effect. What I'm not eating from you should be like a carbon. So then there's no neder here. Mutter. Then it's going to be mutter. So the Gemara will now ask a stira on this brayse and explain what this brayse is saying. Now, man shaminin lei, who is the opinion that says the loishani lei? There's no difference if you say imra, le imra, ke imra. It all means the same thing. Rab Meir. This is Rab Meir. Now, the Ran here points out, the Gemara doesn't really have a clear source that this is Rab Meir. But the thing is, the Mishnah that we had before that did say that there's a distinction between saying ke imra or plain imra, that was Rab Yehuda. In Mishnah it says Rab Yehuda, the Gemara before explained, the whole Mishnah before is Rab Yehuda. Usually the Tana that argues with Rab Yehuda is Rab Meir. Oh, they were always the Bari Plukta. So therefore, over here, this brayse that says that it doesn't make a difference if you say with a chaf or not, it's Rab Meir. So if now we know that the beginning of this brayse is Rab Meir. So now if so, the question is, Seifer. What does it say in the Seifer of the brayse? V'kulon, in all of these cases, if he said lo yoichalach, if he says imra lo yoichalach, what I'm not eating from you should be a imra. So then mutter, the brayse says it's going to be mutter. But the question is, how could that be? Vatnan, in a Mishnah we learned, this is actually the next Mishnah that we're going to learn in a moment. The Mishnah there says, according to Rab Meir, what happens if a person says, le carbon lo yechalach, to a carbon, what I will not eat from you. Rab Meir Eiser. Rab Meir says that it's going to be aser. How's that aser? If a person is saying what I'm not eating from you is going to be a carbon, why should it be aser? So we had this before already in the Gemara. And the Gemara explains the reason is V'amar Rab Abba. Rab Abba says this is how you have to understand this statement. Nase ka'omer. We consider what he says is that he's saying as follows: li carbon, comma, for a carbon, yehei it should be lefichach. Therefore lo yechalach. Therefore I will not eat it from you. So in other words, when he said the words lo yechalach, he's not saying what I'm not eating from you should be a carbon, because then he hasn't said any neder. He's just saying what I'm not eating from you should be a carbon. Rather, what he's saying is le carbon yehei. It should be a carbon. The lamed, actually, it's actually the lamed of the le carbon makes it sound like that the le carbon is like a separate part of a statement, not le carbon lo yechalach. Le carbon yehei. And then when he says lo eichalach, that's the result of what he said. That's not what he's referring to. And therefore, because of this, lo eichalach, I will not eat it from you. That's how Rab Meir understands the statement when he says it with a lamed. So if so, according to Rab Meir, and this Braisa as well, when the person says li imra or li dirim, li eitzim, anytime you put that lamed in the beginning, so then the statement should be understood as like two parts. Li eitzim yehei, comma, and then therefore lo eichalach. So why does it say in the Sefer of this Braisa that when he says lo eichalach that it's mutter and the neder does not take effect? So the Gemara says lo kashya. This is not a question. It depends what he said. Had Amar, and the Bach here is gairis lo imra. If the person says lo imra that it should not be a carbon, what I will not eat from you, so then the neder does not take effect because he's saying it in the negative. What I'm not going to eat from you will not be a carbon. Now, you could have made an inference from that what I will eat from you will be a carbon. But if you remember, we learned before a few times that Rav Meir holds you do not say miklalav atishmei hein. If a person says the negative, I don't deduce from that he means to also say the opposite, that in the positive, I will eat from you will be a carbon. So therefore, if he says loy imra, what I will not eat from you, there's no neder here. And Hada Amar li imra, he says li imra, it's with a shava. Li imra, so then I say li imra yehei, that it should be a carbon, and therefore lo yeichalach, and therefore I will not eat it from you. That's how you understand what he says. So it depends if he's saying lo imra or li imra. Okay. Let's continue. Zok Heilige Mishneh ha'oime carbon. A person says that this object should be a carbon. Oila should be a carbon oila, mincha or a chatos or a taida or a shlamim. Shani yeichalach. What I'm going to eat from you. So what I'm going to eat from you should be a oila, mincha, chatos or taida shlamim.
You from who?
From his friend. He's telling his friend, I don't want to eat from you. He's making a neder not to eat from his friend, that it's going to be also for him to eat from his friend. And he says to his friend, your food should be a oila, mincha, chatas, shlamim.
Somebody else's food because the guy's giving it to him?
He's making a neder.
On somebody else's food?
Yeah. For himself. Not that person shouldn't be allowed to have an awe.
Who said that food is his to...
Now if his friend invites him for Shabbos, so that he's not going to be able to join and eat from him. Making a neder not to eat from him.
Theoretically, you would have given me.
Correct.
It really belongs to me, so I have the permission to say so.
Yeah, exactly. So the point over here is, what's the chiddush of what it says here? So the Mishnah says, Aser, the neder takes effect. What's the chiddush of the neder takes effect? Even though he did not use a chaf. He did not say, your food should be like a oila, like a mincha, and like a chatos. Now, oila, mincha, and chatos, these are various names of karbanis. If he actually said the word carbon, so then for the word carbon, you don't have to have a chaf, because a carbon that's the term that means that this is something which is aser. Oila is not directly the term that means that it's something which is aser. Oila is one type of carbon. It's a name of a carbon. Mincha is also a name of a carbon. So therefore you have to add a chaf to make it clear that you want it to be like this oila. That makes it more unique. This is similar to what the Gemara said before in the previous Mishnah. The same concept of correct. If you add the chaf adimian. If you don't add the chaf adimian, just like the Gemara says regarding, like we just learned before, ki imra, ki didim, ki eitzim, you have to add the chaf adimian. Same thing with these expressions of oila, mincha, chatas, taida, shlamim, you have to add a chaf for that. Otherwise it's going to be mutter. Again. The Tanakama here in the Mishnah says, that's the Chiddush. The Tanakama in this Mishnah says, which is Rab Meir, even without the chaf, it's still going to be aser. Now on that, Rabbi Yehuda mater. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, because he didn't add the chaf, it's going to be mutter. Just like Rabbi Yehuda said in the previous Mishnah, if a person just says Yerushalayim, he didn't add the chaf, it's going to be mutter. Here as well, oila, mincha, chatas, all these cases, he didn't add the chaf, it's going to be mutter. Another halacha. Now this is only according to the Tanakama Rab Meir, as the Gemara is going to point out. Ha-carbon, a person says, what I eat from you should be ha-carbon, or kik-carbon, or carbon, sha'ichalach, what I'm eating from you, aser. Whether he puts the hay before the word carbon, or he doesn't put any hay, or he just puts the chaf, either way it's going to be aser. Now, here comes the halacha that we just mentioned before. If he says, le-carbon, loy-oichalach, to a carbon, what I will not eat from you, Rab Meir says it's aser. And the Gemara explained it before, and we'll see soon again, the Gemara will explain it again. Okay, so now the Gemara will discuss the middle case of the Mishnah. Katani, what did it say in the middle case of the Mishnah? If he says, the Bach here changes the order, like it said it in the Mishnah, ha-carbon, kik-carbon, carbon, sha'ichalach, aser. So in all these cases, it will be aser. So now, stame, etane, ke Rab Meir. So the Mishnah is saying this halacha is a stam halacha without saying who's saying this, but this is Rab Meir. The leishani le bein imra le imra. According to Rab Meir, there's no difference between imra and le imra or ke imra. There's no difference if you put a hey there or a chaf there, or you don't, or you put a lamed there. It doesn't make any difference. And either way, the neder will take effect. Now, Rab Meir, the question now is, so if this mission here is Rab Meir, but then how does that work with ha-carbon? According to Rab Meir, as we'll see here, the Gemara is going to quote, according to Rab Meir, ha-carbon is not a proper lashon of a neder. Ha-diktani ha-carbon shaychalach. That the carbon, what I eat from you, aser, that it will be aser, but how could that be? Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, maidim chachamim l'Rab Yehuda, chachamim maideh to Rab Yehuda. Who's the chachamim? The Gemara is assuming that chachamim is Rab Meir. Chachamim maideh, ba'ayme ha-carbon, a person says, ha-carbon, or ha-ayla, ha-mincha, ha-chata shaychalach, what I eat from you, shemutter, that it's going to be mutter. Why? What's this term ha-carbon? So the Gemara explains, shaloi nada zeh ela b'chaye carbon. When you use the term ha-carbon, what you're saying is, this is a carbon. You're not referring to the isser of the carbon, to the fact that this carbon is also for anybody to have a gnaw from. You're referring to the existence of the carbon, the life of the carbon, just the existence of the behemoth, that it's a living behemoth, it's a live behemoth, but not the isser of it. When you say kick carbon, that it should be like the carbon, then you're referring to the specific status of this carbon right now, that it has a status of being something which is usser. But when you just say ha-carbon, the carbon, you're not referring to the status of it, you're just referring to the existence of it, that it exists, that it's here, that it's alive. So that's not a lashon of a carbon, according to Rab Meir.
What's it called? Carbon?
Okay, I understand, but that's what the Rab Meir says. Ha-carbon is not specific enough. Ha-carbon just means the existence of the behemoth, which is a carbon, which the Gemara calls chaye carbon.
So what did he mean? He meant nothing.
Right, exactly. It means nothing. Says the Gemara. Okay, so the question is, how could it say in our Mishnah when it says ha-carbon that it should be aser? Answers the Gemara, like kashe. It's not a question because it depends what he said. Ha-da amar ha-carbon. If he actually says it, like Rab Meir said in that Braisa, ha-carbon, this is a carbon. So then he's just saying what it is. Ha-carbon, this is a carbon. He's not referring to the isser at all. So then I say it's going to be mutter. Ha-da amar ha-carbon. But if he says it in one word, ha-carbon, that what I eat from you is the carbon, so then he actually does mean the specific status of the carbon, which is the isser. My time chaye carbon kama. Going back again, like the Gemara said before, when he says ha-carbon, it just means the life of the carbon, the existence of the carbon. Okay, now going to the last case of the Mishnah, which we explained before. The Gemara explains it again. I think this is the third or fourth time the Gemara explains it within the last two daf here. Katani, the Mishnah says in the end, if he says li carbon lo yoichalach, for a carbon, what I will not eat from you, Rab Meir says it's aser. So the question is, why? Rab Meir does not hold that if you say something in the negative, that I deduce from this also in the positive. So over here, what did he say? What I'm not eating from you will not be a carbon. So you could understand from that in the positive, what I will eat from you will be a carbon. But the problem is, Rab Meir says we don't understand a person's words that way. We look at what he said, and we don't understand for the positive from the negative that he said. So Amar Abba, like we just learned before, Nase Ka'emer, what this really means is, it's like he's saying, Lekarben Yehei, that what I will not eat from you, Lekarben Yehei, what I will eat from you should be a carbon. And Lefichach Lo Yoichalach, and then you add in that word Lefichach, therefore I will not eat it from you. That's how we understand his words, and therefore the neder takes effect. Okay, one more Mishnah, let's finish the Perek. Zaktei Lege Mishnah, Ha'ayma Lechavere. Person tells his friend, Kainam pi midabe imach. My mouth, kainam, like we already learned before, is a lashon of a carbon. My mouth should be a carbon not to speak to you. So he's basically making a neder not to speak to his friend. Or yadi oise imach. Or he makes a neder, my hand should be like a carbon to not to do anything for you. Or ragli mehaleches imach. Or my feet should be like a carbon that I should not walk with you. Aser. This kind of a neder takes effect, and it will be aser. What's the chiddush over here? What the Mishnah is saying? So we'll see in the Gemara that the chiddush over here is, till here we learned about the concept of a neder applying to an object. You take a certain object and you say this object should be aser like a carbon, or even without the term carbon, this object should be aser. Over here, he's not making his mouth aser. He's making the action of his mouth, or the words that he speaks out of his mouth, or the actions that he does with his hands or with his feet to become aser. And still the neder takes effect. That's the chiddush here.
Why is that a term?
That's a term that's used for a neder. That's term used for a neder. But the chiddush is that it's not the mouth itself, but the words that come out of his mouth. So the Gemara asks on this. Let's see. The question is, we learned later in a Braisa, it says as follows: Chaymer b'shvuas min b'nedarim. There's a stringency in a shvua when a person swears to make something also through a shvua from nedarim, from when you make a vow to make something also by a neder, and also b'nedarim b'shvuas. And there's also a stringency in a neder over a shvua. Chayim b'nedarim, the stringency of a neder is sha'nedarim cholin ala mitzvahs. A neder can take effect even regarding an object of a mitzvah, kibbur rishus, like a permissible object. We learned this in the beginning of the Masechta, Daf Beis Amud Beis. If a person says that a sukkah should be asur to me, so then the neder takes effect, and he can't sit in the sukkah. We'll see about this later in the Gemara. What does a person do in such a case? But the neder takes effect. If a person says, I make a shvuah not to sit in the sukkah, it doesn't take effect. Why? Because the shvuah he makes is on the gavra, on himself, that I will not sit in the sukkah. But you already have mushba va'oimid mahar Sinai. You already took an oath that you're going to sit in the sukkah to fulfill all mitzvahs, so it doesn't take effect. But the neder, it's not on you, it's on the object, that the sukkah is asur. So that does take effect. Masha'en came b'shvuas, which is not the case by a shvuah. Even if he says all sukkahs, he will not be able to sit in the sukkah. Okay, we'll see. The Gemara will talk about this later. Now, v'chaymer b'shvuos, there is a stringency in a shvuah, and that is sha'shvuos chalais al davar sheyesh bei mamish. A shvuah takes effect on something which is tangible, on an object. And also, v'shein bei mamish. You can make a shvuah even about something that's not tangible. You can make a shvuah regarding an action. That I take a shvuah upon myself, that I will go here, I will do this, I will come. It's not something physical, tangible, an object. But a shvuah is on the person. So he's making it on himself that I will do something, so the shvuah takes effect. Masha'en came b'nedarim. But by a neder, the whole concept of a neder is you taking a certain object and you're making it asur. Takes effect on the object. So if so, the Gemara's question is on our Mishnah. How could a person make a neder and say that the words, I will not speak to you, and the words should be like a carbon, or like the actions that I do with my hands and feet should be like a carbon. That's not something tangible. So how does it take effect regarding a neder? Rav Yehuda says, the way we understand his words are over here is as follows. Ba'omer ye'aser pi lidibure. The person is saying, my mouth, he's referring to the mouth. He's making the neder, the mouth is the object of the isser. My mouth should be asur for the words that it speaks. Or yadi limaseyah, my hands should be asur for the actions that it does. Or ragli lihiluchan, or my feet for the walking that it could do. The Gemara doesn't actually mean that he's saying this. The Gemara means even if the person says the lashon that it said in the Mishnah, kainim pi mi daber imach, it means that the mouth will be asur for the speaking that it does. De kenami, and we could see this in the exact words that the Mishnah chooses when how he expresses this neder. The ktani, because the Mishnah says pi mi daber imach, he said my mouth from speaking. V'loy ketani sha'ani medaber imach. It's not talking about the action or the activity of talking, but the neder applies to the mouth that does the talking, and therefore the neder takes effect.